My brother invited us over and assured us that we wouldn't need to worry about rent or utilities. My name is Christina. I work in the finance sector. My husband, whom I'll call Douglas, is a car mechanic. We live in my childhood home. By childhood home, I don't mean that my parents live there. My family home is a long-standing family business where my father used to be the CEO. I have a brother who originally planned to take over my father's company, so he majored in economics in college. On top of that, my talented brother studied abroad at Oxford University, learned more about business management, returned to the United States, and worked with my father for several years. Eventually, my parents wanted to enjoy their retirement and moved to a place like Aspen, Colorado, seeming to enjoy their relaxed life surrounded by nature. Since my brother was given the company in return, my parents passed down the family home to me, their daughter. I decided to live there with my husband. The house is conveniently located with excellent access to public transportation, less than a 5-minute walk from the train station. Commercial facilities, hospitals, and schools are also within walking distance. Considering the future when our children leave the nest, we will be able to live comfortably. In that sense, I am grateful that my parents gave me this house. We were planning on expanding our family and living happily, but we never thought that our life would come to a sudden end because of such an incident. After moving into this house, my mother-in-law started to visit frequently. Knowing that my parents run a business, my mother-in-law often asks about money. Since we got married, she has been curious. "Hey, Christina, how many assets do your parents have? When your parents pass away, how much will you inherit?" she often asks. She frequently talks about these things, and I can't help but think she is rather distasteful. I don't want to be too blunt, so I reply, I wonder how much. I've never really thought about it, so I don't know. I've already received the house, so I might not get any money." Although I laugh and respond lightly, she says, "That can't be true, can it? Your parents are over 60. You never know what might happen. They must have discussed their assets with you." She seemed so interested in the asset discussion that I became convinced she was counting on my parents' wealth. I already knew how much I would receive, but I decided to keep silent, thinking it would be better not to tell my mother-in-law or my husband, who is close to her. However, an unthinkable incident occurred after this. Suddenly, without any notice, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family moved into our house. Around 8 a.m. on a holiday, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, there were movers. "Ha! Why are the movers here?" I asked, surprised and confused. My mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family arrived and said, "We're going to be living here from today, so please take care of us." When I saw their grinning faces, chills ran down my spine. Just then, my husband woke up. When I asked him to explain the situation, he said nonchalantly, "What's the problem if Mom and the others move into this house? It's so spacious, so you should be able to spare some room." He spoke as if it was only natural to give them some space. I was surprised enough that we were living together. But then my sister-in-law said something even more outrageous. "We were invited by your brother, Christina. Since he called us, we're not going to pay any rent or utilities, so we're counting on you." My brother-in-law intruded into various rooms without permission and said, "This room has good sunlight, so give it to us, Douglas. Move all the stuff in here out to the hallway." I felt dizzy at this exchange. This is my house, but they were opening rooms here and there, trying to use them as their own. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family had been lacking common sense for a while, especially my sister-in-law, who had rummaged through my bag without permission before. If things continued like this, they would take over my room. "Enough is enough! This is my house! Why are you acting like you own this place? I've had it! I want everyone to get out!" I normally don't lose my cool or raise my voice in anger, but having these people move into the house my parents gave me without permission and treating it like it was theirs was something I could not stand. That's why I lost control of my emotions and shouted at all three of them. But then, something unexpected happened. "How dare you talk to us like that? You're the one who should get out!" The moment those words were spoken, I felt a severe pain in my cheek. Wait, did I get slapped? I realized what had happened a few seconds after being hit. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what had happened, and all that was left was a throbbing pain in my cheek. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. I can't live with people who would do something like this, but this house is mine. I don't want them living here like parasites. I packed up my things to leave the house, intending to inform my family about this. I had to find a place far away from home, so I rented a monthly apartment for the time being. From there, I would have to commute to work. The moment I told my parents about it over the phone, I could tell they were furious, even through the phone, especially my dad. He is very doting and has always adored me and my brother. He was a strict CEO, but as a father, he was always kind and quick to help when we were in trouble. I didn't want to involve my parents, who were just about to retire, in something like this, but I was forced to because my inherited house was being taken away from me. While I was living in the monthly apartment, I was sure my husband and his family were freely using my house. So I decided to do something that my brother and father suggested. A few days later, I checked my phone during my break and found dozens of missed calls and messages from my husband. I knew why he was calling. I called the water company and the electric company to cut off the utilities. Our house is all electric, so nothing works without electricity, and we haven't installed solar panels yet, so there's no way to supply electricity. It's very hot right now, so it must be pretty tough without electricity and water. The calls from my husband were probably to do something about it. Just as I was about to ignore it, my husband called again, timing it perfectly with my break. "Hey, what's going on? There's no electricity and the water isn't working. You stopped the electricity and water, didn't you?" I could imagine the panicked state my husband was in from his voice over the phone. The house is mine. So now that I'm gone, there's no way I can leave the electricity and water on, right? That's why I had it cut off. If I left the utilities on, I would have to pay the bills even though I'm not living there. I can't accept that, so naturally I had it cut off. At this, my husband was furious and demanded that I renew the contract immediately. Just because he says to renew it doesn't mean I'm going to say, "Okay, I understand." If they want to renew it, they should do it with their own money. But whenever it comes to this, they always say things like, "It's your house, so you should pay." So their words and actions don't match. Anyway, I have no intention of renewing the contract. "If you don't like it, then get out of the house right away," I said. After saying only that, I hung up the phone because my break was ending. Afterward, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law all called me. All of them were saying the same thing. They wanted me to get the electricity and water hooked up. Their room was hot and uncomfortable. They said it was inconvenient without water. But all of this was their problem, not mine. After listening to everything they said, I told them to handle it themselves and hung up the phone. I figured they were just greedy for money and thought they would give up and leave soon. However, even after a week passed, there was no sign of them leaving, so I decided to push them further. I consulted with my father's company's lawyer about the situation and asked him to send a notice to my husband. The content of the notice was about trespassing. They had barged into the house I owned without any consultation, drove me out of it, and were using it as their own. I explained to the four of them who used this malicious tactic that I was considering taking legal action. Hey, what's going on? Why did I get such a document from a lawyer? Was it necessary to go this far? My husband, who seemed panicked and not expecting me to go this far, came to me for a settlement. Knowing how concerned they are about their public image, the prospect of being sued would be extremely damaging to them mentally. They wanted to avoid dealing with a lawyer at all costs, but they didn't want to give up their current lifestyle, so they were probably scheming to persuade me to let them continue their current lifestyle. I could see through what my husband was thinking like it was in the palm of my hand. That said, there was no way I could listen to what they had to say, so I didn't comply with my husband. At this, my husband finally exploded in anger, forgetting that he was at work, and yelled at me loudly, "Cut it out! Are you getting carried away? Just because we're a little underhanded doesn't mean you can act so high and mighty. Go back to how things were right now and drop the lawyer." Even though he yelled in anger, it didn't affect me at all. On the contrary, I was annoyed by his phone call, thinking, "Who do you think you are, taking over someone else's house? No matter what you say or shout at me, my feelings won't change. If you continue to squat there, I will take legal action. You better think hard before you act." Over the phone, my husband was still shrieking, but I ignored him and hung up. This was a waste of time, and I had already talked to my lawyer about divorce. When I got home, I received calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but I knew they were just going to talk about settling the matter. I didn't want to waste any more time, so I blocked their numbers to prevent further calls. After that, my prideful husband's family couldn't bear the idea of being sued, so they packed their bags and vacated the house. Then, the lawyer intervened, and the divorce negotiations proceeded smoothly. I also had a house cleaning service come in, and finally I was able to return to my sparkling clean house. Living apart from my husband's family in a monthly rental was comfortable, but of course, living in my own home was the best. The house is pretty worn down in some places, so I need to consider renovating it soon. I consulted with my father, and he introduced me to a good contractor, so I started consulting about the renovation. Living alone is comfortable. I'm not bound by anyone. I can lie around on the sofa without getting scolded. I can eat whatever I want without anyone saying anything. While I was enjoying my current life, I received a call from my ex-husband for the first time in 3 months. At first, I didn't answer the phone because I didn't recognize the number. But when the call kept coming from the same number, I thought it might be from a contractor. So I reluctantly answered the phone. However, as soon as I recognized the voice, my mood was completely ruined. It was my ex-husband whom I had divorced 3 months ago. I had already divorced him with the intervention of a lawyer. We even made a promise never to approach each other again. So what on earth does he want now? I thought. Changing his phone number just to call me is strange, no matter how you look at it. We promised through our lawyer not to see or contact each other again. There's nothing left for us to talk about, so please don't contact me anymore. Right as I was about to hang up the phone, he said, "Hold on a minute, please. I just need you to listen just for a little while. I'm begging you." With that, he started yapping without any permission from me. My ex-husband's company is facing a serious financial crisis, and it's decided that his salary will be reduced. My mother-in-law's health is not good, and she is unable to work. My sister-in-law and her husband can't contribute to the living expenses since he isn't working a steady job. My sister-in-law is working multiple part-time jobs, but most of her paycheck is being used to pay off the debt that my brother-in-law made. The situation was desperate, as my ex-husband was trying hard to make ends meet, but with his salary getting cut, it would become increasingly difficult to survive. Well, hearing all that, I couldn't think of anything but, okay, is that so? Because they intruded into my house without my permission, did whatever they pleased, and then tried to kick me out. It's simply unbelievable. I feel nothing for the people who did such a thing, and I have no sympathy for them. Even if you tell me these things, it doesn't solve anything. It's your family. You should deal with it yourself. There's nothing I can do about it. At my words, my ex-husband started to panic even more. Don't say things like that. We're in serious trouble. We won't even be able to pay the rent for the apartment, and we'll be struggling for food tomorrow. Hey, we used to be a family, right? Please help us, he pleaded in a voice close to crying. But I was not convinced. When I was in trouble, he did nothing to help and looked down on me, along with my mother-in-law. Just like my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law have also always looked down on me. They insulted me for my plain appearance or my old-fashioned way of thinking. They told me not to come around because they said I was so stiff and outdated, that it was rubbing off on them, and they didn't care how hurt I was. As for my mother-in-law, she not only made things worse, but also pushed me to have a baby as soon as possible, forced strange herbal medicines on me, made unnecessary doctor's appointments, and told all the neighbors that I was a barren wife. Looking back, there wasn't a single good thing about my marriage. My ex-husband, who used to be so kind before we got married, started to become my mother-in-law's puppet after the wedding. The first day my mother-in-law stormed into our house, I was out because I had an appointment. My mother-in-law was upset by this and cried to my husband, "I wanted to see Christina, but she wasn't there. I want to be friends with Christina. I'm sad." After hearing his mother cry, my ex-husband yelled at me without listening to my side of the story. She said that she wanted to get along, but all she ever did when we met was badmouth me. My son seems to have lost weight recently. Is it because your cooking is so bad that he can't eat properly? She said things like this loudly, whether we were at home or outside, so there was no way we could get along. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law also joined in, laughing at me. I can't help people who act like this anymore. No matter what you say, my feelings won't change. I can't help you guys, so I'm going to hang up now, and don't ever contact me again. With that, I finally hung up the phone and blocked the new number. Knowing my ex-husband, he might change his number and try to contact me again. So I decided to change my phone number at the store over the weekend. But before that, those four took action. They broke the promise of the lawyer and suddenly came to my house at 11 p.m. "Open up! Let us in and take care of us! We're family, you should help us!" They were banging on the door, yelling without considering the time. "Hey! What's the matter at this hour? Please go back home as it's causing a nuisance to the neighbors." When I went to open the door, they seemed ready to barge in, so I figured I'd try talking through the intercom. But the four of them didn't care. They started banging on the door and raising a ruckus. I couldn't believe I was dealing with people this out of control. I was left holding my head in my hands. I was considering calling the cops when I heard sirens from outside. It looked like a neighbor had taken the initiative. As soon as they heard the police sirens, the surprised group thought I had called the police and tried to run away. But by then, a crowd had gathered, and escape was not an option. So the four of them were escorted to the police station by the responding officers. I was questioned about the incident, and I explained everything that had happened. After that, word about what my ex-husband and his pals had done spread quickly in the neighborhood. It turned out that among the crowd that had gathered was a co-worker of my ex-husband's. So by the next day, the whole office knew what had happened. He was already having a hard time because of a pay cut. But after getting the police involved, the company wasn't going to let it slide. My ex-husband ended up getting fired and couldn't afford to pay his apartment rent anymore. Money issues caused a rift between him and his sister's family, so their group living situation ended. Now Douglas is living in public housing with his mother, working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. Even his mother has started working part-time a few days a week, desperate to earn money. Let's conclude the story. Christina's life took an unexpected turn when her in-laws moved into her house without permission, creating chaos and tension. Despite the upheaval, Christina stood her ground, asserting her rights and taking decisive action to reclaim her home. Her husband, Douglas, and his family tried to manipulate and control her, but Christina's determination and support from her own family helped her navigate through the difficult situation. Cutting off the utilities and consulting a lawyer proved to be effective strategies. The pressure from potential legal action forced Douglas's family to vacate the house. The divorce negotiations proceeded smoothly, allowing Christina to regain control of her life and her home. With her ex-husband and his family out of the picture, Christina focused on renovating her home and enjoying her newfound independence. She relished the freedom of living alone, making her own choices, and creating a space that was truly hers. Despite attempts by her ex-husband to seek help due to his financial troubles, Christina remained resolute, refusing to be drawn back into their toxic dynamics. Ultimately, the story is one of resilience and self-empowerment. Christina emerged stronger from the ordeal, learning to prioritize her well-being and happiness. She rebuilt her life on her terms, free from the burdens and manipulation of those who had once tried to control her. Her journey serves as a reminder of the importance of standing up for oneself and the value of a supportive family. After experiencing the full journey of our story, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How did the story resonate with you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the ninth grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.